Imagine this: the person who once broke your heart, humiliated you, and walked away without a second thought. What if they came back? But this time, they were broken, defeated, and begging for your help. What would you do? Would you show mercy, or would you let bitterness and anger take control? This is the story of Matthew, a man who faced the greatest betrayal of his life and yet chose to rise, not just for revenge, but for the love of his children and his own peace of mind. Matthew was a man of integrity. He wasn't born with a silver spoon, but his hands were always busy, working, building, and providing for his family. Every morning, while the sun was still asleep, Matthew woke up to prepare for the day ahead. He worked long hours, no matter how tired, and made sure to never complain. He wasn't rich, but he had a clear purpose in life: to work hard, live honestly, and love his family deeply. One day, during one of the better moments in his life, Matthew met Maria. She was everything he could have ever dreamed of: beautiful, full of life, and full of hopes for a future of success. They fell in love quickly, married with excitement, and even had 2 children, a boy and a girl. Life was full of dreams and hope, and Matthew believed he had everything he needed to build the perfect life. But as time passed, Maria's demands grew. At first, it was small things: a new dress, a better house, nicer things, but soon, it turned into something deeper. Maria wanted more. She wanted the luxury she saw in the lives of others. And no matter what Matthew did, it was never enough. Every time Matthew came home with a paycheck, Maria found a reason to complain. She compared him to Funmi, her best friend, who had a wealthy sugar daddy. Funmi's life was full of expensive gifts, fancy cars, and vacations. What Maria didn't know was that Funmi's wealth came from dark, dangerous rituals, a truth she would learn too late. Despite all this, Matthew tried. When Maria demanded a new car, Matthew entered his savings to buy her one. It wasn't the flashiest car, but it was reliable, and it showed his love and sacrifice. But Maria didn't see it that way. "Even Funmi's driver has a better car than this," she scoffed, her words cutting deep. The insults grew louder, the humiliation deeper, and after 5 years of marriage, Maria made a decision. She left him. She left Matthew and their 2 children without hesitation, as if they meant nothing to her. She walked out of their home and vanished. Matthew was shattered. His heart broke not just for the woman he loved, but for the family they were supposed to be. He couldn't understand how she could leave so easily, but despite his pain, he didn't give up. He couldn't. His children needed him, and Matthew was determined to be both a father and mother to them. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Matthew worked harder than ever, taking on multiple jobs just to make ends meet. He cooked, cleaned, and made sure his children knew they were loved. Despite the struggle, Matthew never let his children feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. He was everything they needed, a steady, loving force in their lives. 2 years passed, and life it was hard, but it was manageable. Then, something unexpected happened. Sarah, a woman unlike any other, entered Matthew's life. She was kind, humble, and full of faith. She didn't care about his bank account or the house he lived in. She saw his heart, and that was all that mattered to her. With Sarah, Matthew found peace again. They married, and soon, things began to change. Opportunities that once seemed impossible began to open up. His hard work started to pay off. Matthew's business grew. He made smart investments. Within a few years, Matthew's life transformed. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. By the time he turned 40, he was a successful international businessman, his company touching lives across continents. But despite all the success, there was something he couldn't shake. It was the memory of Maria. The pain of her betrayal, her abandonment, lingered in his heart. That was until one blistering afternoon, when everything changed. Matthew stepped out of his office building, the sun burning down on the busy street below, when he saw something he couldn't believe. There, on the roadside, selling oranges under the hot sun, was Maria. Her clothes were worn, her face tired, and she looked nothing like the woman who once demanded the finest things in life. When Maria saw him, she tried to run, to disappear. But Matthew stopped her. He walked up to her and, without anger, asked, "Why are you here? Why are you still struggling?" Maria lowered her head, shame in her eyes. She spoke softly, "I lost everything. My best friend betrayed me. Now I'm married to a poor man." The woman who once stood tall with pride was now a broken shadow of herself. The sun seemed to judge her as it beat down on her, sweat dripping from her forehead. Matthew didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, not with bitterness, but with something deeper, understanding. He motioned for her to sit under the small shade near his office. She hesitated but sat down. As Maria began to speak, she explained how, after leaving Matthew, she had believed she was making the right choice. She moved in with Funmi, hoping for a better life. But what she didn't know was that Funmi's wealth was the result of dark rituals, sacrifices that cost more than money. When Maria refused to take part, her life quickly turned upside down. She was framed for a crime she didn't commit, lost her job, and her reputation was destroyed. She had nothing left. Desperate and ashamed, she returned to her hometown, where she met Joseph, a humble gatekeeper at a local school. He took her in, gave her a second chance, and loved her despite her past. But life with Joseph wasn't easy. Money was scarce, and the weight of her past mistakes was a constant burden on Maria's heart. "I thought I was choosing a better life," she whispered. "But I lost everything, my kids, my dignity, my future." Matthew listened quietly. He understood what it was like to lose everything. He remembered the nights he spent crying after Maria left. The times he questioned if he was enough. But he also remembered how far he had come, not because of anger or bitterness, but because he chose to rise. "You don't owe me an apology," Matthew said softly. "You owe yourself one." With those words, Matthew stood up, dusted off his suit, and walked away. He left Maria to reflect on her choices. The next morning, something inside Matthew stirred. He couldn't forget Maria, sitting in the sun, worn out and defeated. He made a decision. Without telling anyone, not even Sarah, Matthew went back to the street where Maria had been selling oranges. She wasn't there, so he asked around and found out she had moved closer to the market. When he finally found her, she looked even more tired, her clothes even more worn. This time, Matthew approached her gently. "I need to talk to you," he said. She hesitated, then nodded. They sat on a bench in the noisy market, but between them, there was silence, a silence filled with regret and healing. Matthew reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to her without a word. Maria opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside was a job offer, a real opportunity, not charity, not pity, but a chance to rebuild. Matthew had created a position at his company, one that would offer training, support, and a fair wage. "Why are you doing this?" Maria whispered, surprised. Matthew smiled and replied, "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to lose everything. But you can rebuild yourself. You don't get to choose what happens to you, but you can choose who you become." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. She accepted the job offer, and from that day, she worked hard, stayed humble, and began to rebuild her life. Slowly, she reconnected with her children, and over time, they forgave her. Joseph stood by her side, and together, they built a new life. Matthew's company continued to grow, and he became not just wealthy, but wise. He knew that true strength wasn't about revenge but about rising above. It was about choosing kindness when bitterness knocks at the door. 1 year later, during a company event, Maria stood on stage and shared her story, not to seek sympathy, but to inspire others. "I once thought happiness came from having more," she said. "I left love, family, and truth behind in search of comfort. But I lost everything. When I thought my life was over, someone gave me a chance, not because I earned it, but because he believed in me." She turned and smiled at Matthew, who was watching quietly from the back of the room. "That man taught me that greatness isn't about what you have, It's about what you do with what you have. And the greatest thing of all is forgiveness. The crowd applauded. Matthew simply smiled. He had come full circle. The moral, true strength comes not from revenge, but from rising above. Life is about how we handle what we're given. Redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about building a better future. Everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to change.